So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Dave Kerpen. Hi, Dave.
Hi, how are you, Adrian?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, Dave, for the benefit of our readers and listeners, can you tell us a little bit about you, your career, and the work that you currently do?
Sure. So I have a company called Likeable Local. We're a social media software company. We help small businesses manage their social media presence using our proprietary software. I
Okay.
also founded a company, and I'm the chairman of the board still of a company called Likeable Media. That's a social media and word of mouth marketing agency that works with large companies like Verizon, Neutrogena, Medtronic, and Logitech in
Okay.
helping them leverage their social media.
Fantastic. Now, Dave, you've just recently published a new book called Likeable Business, which was on the back of Likeable Social Media. But Likeable Business it says why today's consumers demand more and how leaders can deliver. Can you tell us a bit about that and what's the background and the main thesis of the book?
Sure. So, as I wrote and spoke about likable social media, my first book that fortunately is a New York Times bestseller and has done very well, I realized that the principles of likable social media, principles like listening and passion and responsiveness and surprise and delight, those aren't just great principles of social media. Those are principles of any great business in today's day and age. So,
Right.
likable business talks about 11 simple concepts to become a better leader of your business or your organization wherever you are. And they're all tried and true business concepts, but they're things that so many of us take for granted, that if we really start thinking about them, we can become better leaders, better people, and see success in our companies.
Okay, that's great. So you mentioned these 11 principles. Can you tell us a bit more about those? What's in them, as it were?
Sure. Well, I'll run through them real quick, and then I'll highlight a couple of them for you. So
Perfect.
the 11 principles, the 11 simple ways to become a better leader are listening, storytelling, authenticity, transparency, team playing, responsiveness, adaptability, passion, surprise and delight, simplicity, and gratefulness.
Okay.
And probably my favorites are what I begin the book with and end the book with, and those are listening and gratefulness. I think that any good relationship, business or otherwise, starts with great listening and great clear communication. And any great business relationship also includes gratefulness, the ability to say thank you, the ability to really appreciate the people in your life and in your business that help get you where you are.
Okay. And now, why do you think that some of these, I mean, these principles, they're very human principles, aren't they? I mean, why do you think that they're becoming more important now?
Well, I think that the larger we get as a society, the smaller we in fact get, because communication and social media have rendered things so different now. Everyone is just a degree or two away from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and every piece of information is just a tweet away from being shared with the world.
Uh-huh.
Things get shared quickly and move faster than ever before in this social media universe. So if you can't be a good human, if you can't be authentic and transparent, and as I said, just a good person, then things are going to catch up with you, and your business won't be successful anymore because there's really is no hiding secrets anymore.
Okay. Now, on those 11 principles, I mean, in the book you use a diagram which is a pyramid and things, and I don't know if that diagram is that for convenience, or do you think that's the way that they all fit together?
Yeah, I think that's how they fit together. I think that on the bottom of the pyramid are the elements of leadership that are sort of most fundamental.
Okay.
And as you work your way up the pyramid, you get into some more challenging concepts to integrate.
Okay. And I mean, the thing that strikes me with all of this sort of stuff, and I think this is it's a general concern, because the things that I talk about on the blog, and the things that I really like, is I like focusing on customer service and companies and businesses that are doing great stuff for their customers and also for their people. And that's where my real interest lies. And one of the things that I think about as well is, and then maybe this is related to some of the stuff that you're talking about in the book, is that there seems to be a mismatch between what is getting taught in many business schools, as it were, and what is getting executed and what is best practice around the world of business. So you talk about likable business, and I think these are all great principles. But I've done a quick survey of some of the major business schools around the world, and it's quite surprising to understand or to learn that very, very few business school modules and or sort of business school sort of curricula, as it were, are teaching customer service and retention and loyalty skills, particularly for frontline people as well as sort of leadership as well. And do you think there's a bit of a lag between how we educate people and also kind of what is actually happening in the real world?
Yeah, I do. I think that there's traditionally been more of a focus in business schools on strategy,
Okay.
and I think that while strategy is very important, I believe that culture is more important. And building a likable culture at your company and in your relationships with your customers is I believe more important than any sort of business strategy that you can have. Ultimately, it's your staff and your customers that are going to grow your business,
Mm-hmm.
that are going to decide whether your business succeeds or fails.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the focus needs to be on just those two things: your staff and your customers.
So it's back to Peter Drucker when he said the primary purpose of a business is to acquire and retain a customer.
Exactly, exactly. I'm a fan.
Really, really simple stuff. Now, based on the ideas you share in the books, I mean, this for many businesses, this might feel, as you say, is it's a bit of a culture change. It's a bit of a shift. What would you suggest would be the top three tips that for businesses and leaders to become more likable? Because this isn't a journey from A to B. This is a continuous process, right?
It is, and I also think that while theory is interesting, I believe in real practical takeaway advice and counsel. And so the book is chock full of actionable items
Okay.
that really folks can take away. And so, a few things I talked about listening, and I actually write in the book about how to measure your
Right.
own listening and the key performance indicators around listening.
Okay.
So you can actually go into a meeting and record or have your assistant record how much time you spend talking in the meeting versus how much time you spend listening, and how many questions you ask versus how many statements you give. And you can actually measure your listening capacity over time.
Yes.
In my chapter on gratefulness, I talk about the power of handwritten thank you cards and how I habitualized that process. So now I write 3 thank you cards every single morning. In fact, just got into the office this morning and I've got my 3. Actually, I wrote 4 thank you cards this morning, and those thank you cards really have helped to build a culture of gratitude, I believe, in our office here.
Okay.
And then one more around authenticity. Just be yourself.
Okay.
It seems so simple, and yet so many business people struggle with that. They aren't the same person at home that they are at work. They aren't the same person in public that they are in private. And being your authentic self wherever you are is actually not only a great business builder and a culture builder, but it's very freeing. You don't have to worry about trying to be someone that you're not ever.
Well, I think that reminds me of sort of two things. One is an idea that I have, which I call the Jekyll and Hyde syndrome, which is sometimes we operate as professionals and we do things in what we think is a very very professional sort of way, but then we're a different person when we cross the threshold of our office and
Yep.
become a regular person, a customer, as it were. And it's how we lose that perspective. And I think it relates also back to something my father sort of told me when I was very, very young, where he said to me, rather than just saying don't lie because lying's not good, it says don't lie because it's really hard. Because if you start lying, you have to keep lying, and eventually you'll get found out. So
I totally agree with you, Adrian. Of course, not lying because lying isn't good is a good reason. But practically speaking, you're absolutely right. Trying
yeah,
to be someone you're not, being inauthentic or being non-transparent is
yes,
actually much harder to do because you have to worry about who you said to what to whom and what you said to whom, excuse me, and and
And
what
what the
trying to
implications are, that, or who you said to what and when, and what the implications were and all that sort of stuff.
exactly. It's actually gets very complicated, and there's an easier way. Just be fully authentic and transparent wherever you are.
Absolutely, I just think with my dad, he was trying to be a bit more sort of practical about it. He did tell me not to lie because it's not good, and that was a very valid reason. But it's more of a case of, but here's what happens when you become that sort of person. When you become different people for different people, as it were. He said it's just really really hard, and it's like you do get found out, and it's just a struggle. And I think that's it's a big thing that I think that big challenge that many leaders face is that the idea of, well, be yourself. But then maybe an even bigger challenge is actually, who am I?
Right.
And actually
Right.
getting to know and sort of like yourself and being willing to share that with the world.
Absolutely, Adrian. Well, now we're getting really deep. That's beyond the scope of who am I? Is beyond the scope of this book, but maybe
Well,
another one.
indeed. So, I mean, so this seems to be. I mean, because you touched on, it's all about creating a culture, and in culture, and like to quote that famous phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Creating culture is a thing that keeps coming up. I keep doing these interviews, and it keeps coming up again and again and again. I mean, in terms of creating a more likable culture, where would you suggest that leaders start? Is it start with listening? Because I know there's stories in the book that you talked about where you went into one meeting and you just normally you would be saying things and asking questions, but you just stopped and just listened, didn't say anything, and that was a really stressful to start with for all the people in the room, and then some really beautiful stuff started to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it starts with listening, and I think it starts with transparency. We have our business plan, our strategic plan, our finances, all literally up on the walls of our offices for anyone and everyone to see. And I think that creates a sense of openness and understanding that we're all in this together and that we're all part of a team.
Okay, now the book is absolutely packed with case studies and actionable tips, as you say, all the way through it. I mean, and there was too many to reference. I mean, what I would like you to do, if that's okay, is there a couple of sort of examples of things that really sort of stand out for you in the book that you'd like to highlight?
Well, I think each chapter really has, as you mentioned, a whole bunch of case studies.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about listening, I think about Maxine Clark, the CEO of Build-A-Bear, that spends every single week she visits a different store and gets feedback from her employees on how they're doing and what they need. And
Right.
she also has an advisory board of children
Okay.
who let her know what they want to see in the products that Build-A-Bear offers. When I think about authenticity, I think about the CEO of a company called Belfour, very large property restoration company, and the CEO's name, a guy by the name of Sheldon Yellen, who insists upon doing any single job that that he would ask anyone to do.
Right.
If that means climbing ladders and getting down and dirty, that's who he is, and he insists upon demonstrating that for his team.
Yeah.
When I think about passion, I actually talk about my first job where I was a ballpark vendor in baseball stadium and basketball and hockey games. And in order to sell more product, I started really putting passion into my job, and I started a singing and dancing act that ended up not only being a lot of fun, but generating quite a bit of business. And I really didn't have any talent at all, but the one thing I did have was passion for what I was doing, and it led to really great things for myself.
That's not caught on YouTube anywhere, is it?
I don't think it is because it was pre-YouTube, unfortunately.
And maybe you got away with it then.
Exactly.
Excellent. So, Dave, that's really great. I mean, I think what I like about the book is that it's really it is chocked full. It's not a lot of theories, chocked full of stories, of case studies, of tips, I mean, really personal stories, rather than just being full of, here's another strategic or theoretical framework for you to thinking about how I'm going to apply it. But it's very much rooted in the real world, which is and real practice, which I think is great. And it's all about people really doing things and how we can learn from them and how we can learn to, think about how we can emanate them and apply some of the things that they're doing in their business. So I congratulate you on the book. I think it's a great piece of work.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. And so, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Anything that you think, well, here's a couple of final thoughts before I ask you my final kind of question about the book and about just being likable.
Well, I think that these things are not complicated. They're actually quite simple, and yet there's so many things that we often take for granted in the quest for the almighty customer growth dollar, etc. And if we just sit back and take a step back and try to integrate these concepts into our daily lives, then we'd all be a lot better off.
Fantastic. And now that brings me to my final question. And this is a question I always finish all of these interviews with, and that is, what would you like to shamelessly plug?
Well, I'm really not about the shameless plugs, but I will say that responsiveness is one of my own core values. And so if anybody has any questions at all, they can ask me those questions in a wide variety of ways. They can tweet me at Dave Kerpen, Kerpen. They can follow me on LinkedIn now. I'm one of 200 folks blogging on LinkedIn. They can follow me on LinkedIn and ask questions there. They can ask questions on Facebook. And, of course, the books, if you do want to learn more about them, I won't shamelessly plug them, but I'll give you the sites to learn more about them, likeablebook.com and likeablebusiness.com.
Dave, that's perfect. I'll make sure I get all that linked up. And so give it a big the books and all your social media channels a big shout out at the end of the post. Thank you again so much for your time today. That's been really interesting, and I'll write this up and get it all edited up, and I'll let you know when it goes live.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and you have a super likable rest of your day.
Fantastic. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.